In a quiet suburban town, a grieving father crosses paths with a runaway teen who bears an uncanny resemblance to his son, lost 7 years ago in a tragic accident. But when the boy's silver necklace, identical to the one buried with his son, catches the light, a mystery begins to unravel. Secrets buried for decades resurface, leading to a heart-pounding chase for the truth. Who is this boy? How is he connected to the past? And can love bridge the gap between two lives torn apart? Stay tuned for a story that will challenge fate and redefine family. But before diving, let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we'll be bringing you more amazing gift tomorrow. Now let's start this journey together. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow over the quiet streets of Willow Creek, where the rustling autumn leaves whispered stories of seasons past. Officer Nathan Carter gripped the steering wheel of his patrol car, his knuckles tightening with each turn as he navigated the familiar neighborhood. It was a routine patrol, yet nothing felt routine about this day. 7 years had passed since the accident that had taken his son, Daniel, from him, but the pain lingered like a shadow, ever present and unrelenting. Every house, every street corner in Willow Creek seemed to hold a fragment of a memory. Daniel's laughter as he rode his bike down Maple Avenue, or the way he'd race up the hill after soccer practice, always out of breath but grinning from ear to ear. Nathan exhaled deeply, his chest heavy as the image of Daniel's smile flickered in his mind, both a comfort and a torment. The police radio crackled with mundane updates. A minor fender bender on Lincoln Drive, a noise complaint near Cedar Lane. But Nathan barely registered them. His mind was elsewhere, drifting to the small wooden box tucked away in his bedroom closet. Inside were all that remained of Daniel's life, his soccer trophies, crayon-drawn Father's Day cards, and the silver necklace that Daniel had always worn. A simple pendant etched with a swirling knot design. The memory of lowering that necklace into Daniel's grave haunted Nathan most of all. Lost in thought, Nathan almost didn't see the figure darting across the street in front of him. He hit the brakes instinctively, the patrol car jerking to a halt as a teenage boy scrambled between two parked cars and froze in the middle of the road. The boy's wide eyes met Nathan's through the windshield, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Nathan flicked on his patrol lights and stepped out of the car, his boots crunching against the asphalt. The boy, no older than 16, stood awkwardly, his shoulders hunched beneath a tattered hoodie that hung loose on his wiry frame. His jeans were frayed at the cuffs, and his sneakers had seen better days. Nathan approached slowly, his hand resting on his utility belt, not out of caution but habit. "Hey there," Nathan called out, his voice steady but gentle. "You know jaywalking's not exactly safe, right?" The boy shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting to the sidewalk, as if considering making a run for it. "Sorry," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "What's your name?" Nathan asked, stopping a few feet away. "Eli," the boy replied after a pause. "Eli Foster." Nathan felt the breath leave his lungs as he studied the boy's face. The sharp jawline, the slight dimple in his left cheek, the unruly mop of dark brown hair. It was like looking at a ghost. Eli could have been Daniel's twin, down to the way he stood with one foot slightly turned inward. "You from around here, Eli?" Nathan managed to ask, his throat dry. Eli nodded vaguely, his eyes still avoiding Nathan's. "Kind of." Before Nathan could ask more, something caught his eye, a glint of silver against Eli's chest as the boy adjusted the strap of his backpack. Hanging from a thin chain around Eli's neck was a pendant, simple yet unmistakable. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. "Your necklace," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where'd you get it?" Eli's hand shot up to the pendant, clutching it protectively as he took a small step back. "It's mine," he said quickly, his tone defensive. Nathan forced himself to stay calm, though his mind was racing. The pendant was identical to the one Daniel had worn. The same swirling knot design, the same worn edges. Nathan's hand instinctively went to his own chest, where a matching necklace used to rest before he'd lost it during a scuffle years ago. "I'm not saying it's not yours," Nathan said carefully, holding up his hands in a gesture of reassurance. "It's just interesting, that's all." Eli frowned, his grip on the necklace tightening. Is that all, officer? Nathan hesitated, the weight of his unanswered questions pressing heavily against him. Just be careful crossing the street next time, okay? Eli nodded curtly and turned to leave, his worn sneakers scuffing against the pavement as he hurried away. Nathan watched him go, the silver pendant catching the sunlight with each step, until Eli disappeared around the corner and out of sight. Back in his patrol car, Nathan sat in stunned silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded against his ribcage, a mix of fear, hope, and disbelief swirling inside him. How was it possible? The pendant had been buried with Daniel. He was certain of it. And yet here it was, worn by a boy who looked as though he could have been Daniel's reflection. The resemblance was too striking to be mere coincidence. Nathan's thoughts spiraled as he drove aimlessly through the streets of Willow Creek, the familiar landmarks blurring together. Who was Eli Foster? How did he have Daniel's necklace? And why did he look so much like the son Nathan had lost? The questions clawed at him, each more urgent than the last, until Nathan could barely breathe under the weight of them. He knew he wouldn't find peace until he uncovered the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Nathan parked his patrol car in front of the small bungalow he called home. The house was quiet, his wife, Amanda, likely still at work at the community center. For a moment, Nathan considered leaving the mystery alone, burying it alongside the grief he'd carried for so long. But the image of Eli's face, so eerily familiar, refused to let him go. He made his way to the bedroom closet, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the wooden box on the top shelf. Opening it, Nathan sifted through the cherished relics of Daniel's life, finally pulling out a photograph of his son from their last family vacation. In the picture, Daniel smiled brightly, the silver pendant gleaming against his chest. Nathan stared at it, his chest tightening as he compared it to the image of Eli that was now burned into his memory. The same pendant, the same face. Nathan's fingers brushed over the photograph, his mind racing. There had to be an explanation. He just needed to find it. Nathan Carter sat in his dimly lit living room, the photograph of Daniel resting on his lap like a weight he couldn't bear to put down. The silver necklace in the picture gleamed under the light of the nearby lamp, its intricate knot design almost seeming alive. Outside, the world was quiet, the hum of cicadas filling the void left by his troubled thoughts. The encounter with Eli Foster had stirred something in Nathan, an ache he thought he'd buried. Daniel's death had been a wound that never fully healed, but tonight it felt freshly torn open. Nathan's fingers traced the edges of the photo, his mind spinning with questions he couldn't answer. How could that boy have Daniel's necklace? And why did he look so much like his son? Amanda's voice broke through his thoughts as she stepped into the room, her eyes narrowing at the haunted expression on Nathan's face. You've been quiet all evening, she said gently, sitting across from him. What's going on? Nathan hesitated. Amanda had been his anchor through everything. The funeral, the sleepless nights, the anniversaries that seemed to hurt more with each passing year. But this was something he wasn't ready to share, not yet. Just a tough day on patrol, he said finally, forcing a small smile. Amanda studied him for a moment, then nodded, sensing his reluctance. All right, but when you're ready to talk, I'm here. She rose, pressing a kiss to the top of his head before retreating to the kitchen. Left alone, Nathan leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting to the wooden box on the coffee table. He opened it slowly, pulling out item after item. Daniel's soccer medal, a faded birthday card scrawled in childish handwriting, a ticket stub from their last father-son movie night. Each piece felt like a fragment of a life cut short. When he reached the bottom of the box, his fingers brushed against the cool metal of his own necklace, the twin to the one Daniel had worn. He held it up to the light, the swirling knot design identical to the one he'd seen around Eli's neck earlier that day. Nathan clenched the pendant tightly in his fist, his jaw set with determination. He had to know the truth. The following evening, Nathan drove back to Preston Street. The dimly lit neighborhood felt even darker under the weight of his mission. His Patrol car moved slowly, the headlights sweeping over storefronts and alleys as he searched for any sign of Eli. As he turned the corner near a row of closed shops, movement caught his eye. Behind a small convenience store, a figure crouched near the dumpster, pulling flattened boxes out one by one. Nathan parked his car and stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel as he approached. Eli, he called softly, not wanting to startle him. The boy froze, his head snapping up in alarm. For a moment, his eyes darted around, searching for an escape route, but he didn't run. "Relax," Nathan said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I just want to talk." Eli straightened slowly, his expression guarded. "What do you want?" Nathan took a step closer, his voice calm. "I saw you earlier, crossing the street. I couldn't shake the feeling that we've met before." Eli frowned, his hand instinctively clutching the silver pendant around his neck. "I don't know you." Nathan's gaze flicked to the necklace, its design identical to his own. "That's an interesting piece you've got there. Where'd you get it?" Eli's shoulders tensed. "What's it to you?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Nathan said carefully. "I'm just curious. That necklace, it looks exactly like one my son used to wear." Eli's expression faltered for a moment, a flicker of something. Fear, sadness, recognition, crossing his face. Then, just as quickly, he masked it. "Some old lady gave it to me years ago," he said, his voice flat. "Old lady?" Nathan pressed, his heart pounding. Eli shrugged. "At a shelter. She said it would bring me luck." He let out a bitter laugh. "Guess she was wrong about that." Nathan's eyes softened as he took in the boy's hollow cheeks and too thin frame. "When's the last time you ate?" Eli hesitated, then shrugged again, his attempt at nonchalance betrayed by the hunger in his eyes. "There's a diner around the corner," Nathan offered. "Let me buy you dinner. No strings attached." Eli stared at him, suspicion etched into every line of his face. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, but I'm ordering whatever I want." They walked in silence to the diner, where a cheerful waitress greeted them and led them to a booth near the window. Eli wasted no time scanning the menu, his eyes lighting up at the sight of burgers and fries. Nathan ordered a coffee, watching as Eli placed his order: a double cheeseburger, extra fries, and a milkshake. When the food arrived, Eli dug in with an intensity that made Nathan's chest ache. He recognized that hunger, not just for food, but for comfort, for safety, for something to hold on to. "So, Eli," Nathan began, keeping his tone light. "What's your story?" Eli paused, a fry halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean? You live around here?" "Not really," Eli said, his voice cautious. "I stay where I can. Shelters, mostly." "And your family?" Eli's hand went to the necklace again, his fingers twisting the chain absently. "Don't remember them. There was a fire when I was a baby. That's what they told me, anyway. Some lady pulled me out." Nathan leaned forward, his heart hammering. "The woman who saved you. Do you remember her name?" "Evelyn," Eli said after a moment. "Evelyn Harper." Nathan's mind raced. The name didn't sound familiar, but it was a lead, a thread to follow. Eli pushed his empty plate away and leaned back in the booth, his arms crossed. "Why do you care anyway?" Nathan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because I think there's more to your story than you realize. That necklace, it's important. Not just to you, but to me." Eli's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" Nathan took a deep breath. "I don't know yet, but I want to help you figure it out." Eli snorted, his defenses rising again. "Yeah, sure. Like I haven't heard that before." "I mean it," Nathan said firmly. "You don't have to trust me right now, but give me a chance, and I'll prove it." Eli studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he slid out of the booth, pulling his hood up. "Thanks for the meal, officer, but I'm good on my own." Nathan stood as well, watching as Eli walked to the door. "If you ever need anything," he called after him, "you know where to find me." Eli paused, glancing back for just a second before disappearing into the night. Nathan returned to his patrol car, the boy's words echoing in his mind. There was a fire. Evelyn Harper. The necklace. Piece by piece, a puzzle was forming, and Nathan knew he wouldn't rest until he found the missing pieces. Nathan Carter couldn't sleep. The image of Eli's haunted eyes and the story of the necklace gnawed at him, each fragment of information tugging at his instincts. A name now anchored his search: Evelyn Harper. Somewhere in this tangled web of grief and mystery, she held answers that could bring clarity to the questions clouding his mind. The next morning, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, scrolling through public records. The first few searches yielded little: a few references to local shelters, volunteer work, and minor mentions of an Evelyn Harper in the neighboring town of Meadowbrook. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard before entering the last known address linked to her name. Nathan shut his laptop with a determined click. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside, the brisk morning air clearing his head as he climbed into his car. Meadowbrook was quieter than Willow Creek, its streets lined with old brick buildings and modest homes. The address led him to a small bungalow with faded blue paint and a garden that, though overgrown, hinted at someone's careful touch in years past. Nathan stepped onto the creaky wooden porch and knocked on the screen door. For a moment, nothing stirred inside, and he wondered if the address was outdated. Then, the sound of shuffling footsteps grew louder. The door opened slowly, revealing a thin, elderly woman with kind, weathered eyes and a head of tightly curled gray hair. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. "Mrs. Green?" Nathan asked, his voice soft but firm. "I'm Nathan Carter. I was hoping you could help me with something." She studied him for a moment before nodding and stepping aside. "Come in, Officer Carter." Inside, the home was cozy but sparse. Family photographs lined the walls, faded but lovingly displayed. The air smelled faintly of lavender, and the furniture looked like it had been carefully maintained for decades. Nathan sat on a worn armchair as Evelyn settled across from him. "You said you needed my help?" she prompted, folding her hands in her lap. "I met a young man recently," Nathan began, choosing his words carefully. "He mentioned that you helped him when he was a child." "Eli Foster." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line, and her eyes softened. "I remember Eli," she said after a pause. "I found him after the fire. He was just a baby then. Can you tell me more about that night?" Nathan asked. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her gaze distant as she recalled the details. "It was the middle of the night, one of the coldest winters I can remember. I'd been volunteering at the shelter on Oak Street when the call came in. A fire had broken out at a foster home nearby. I ran there as fast as I could, and by the time I arrived, the flames had already engulfed most of the building." Nathan leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "I remember hearing a baby crying," Evelyn continued, her voice growing quieter. "The firefighters were trying to clear the house, but I couldn't stand there and do nothing. I ran in and found him in a crib, surrounded by smoke. His little face was so red from crying, but he didn't make a sound when I picked him up, just looked at me with those big, wide eyes." "Did you know anything about his family?" Nathan asked. Evelyn shook her head. "No one claimed him. The foster records were destroyed in the fire, and he didn't have any identifying documents. I took him to the shelter that night and cared for him for a few weeks until the authorities placed him in another home. But before I let him go, I gave him something." Nathan's pulse quickened. "The necklace?" Evelyn nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It was given to me years ago by a family I used to work for. A kind boy named Daniel gave it to me, said it was special. I thought it might bring Eli some protection, some luck." Nathan's breath caught. "Daniel?" "That was my son's name." Evelyn's expression shifted, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Your son, he must have been the boy I babysat for when I was younger. He was such a sweet child, always thoughtful. I kept that necklace for years, waiting for the right moment to pass it on." Nathan's chest tightened. The threads of the story were starting to weave together, but it still felt impossible. How had Daniel's necklace ended up with Eli? "Mrs. Green," Nathan said carefully, "I need to ask you something difficult. Is there any chance Eli could be connected to my son? Maybe even related?" Evelyn hesitated, then rose from her chair and disappeared into another room. When she returned, she carried a small wooden box, much like the one Nathan kept for Daniel's belongings. She opened it and handed Nathan a yellowed envelope. "These are the records I managed to save from the shelter," she explained. "It's not much, but it might help you find the answers you're looking for." Nathan unfolded the papers carefully, scanning the faded writing. One detail stood out: Eli's birth date, which matched Daniel's exactly. His heart raced as the pieces clicked into place. Later that evening, Nathan sat in the records office at Willow Creek Hospital, the box of documents Evelyn had given him resting on the desk beside him. With the help of an old colleague, Grace Mitchell, who worked in medical archives, he began combing through birth records from the year Daniel was born. "I can't believe you're making me go this far back," Grace teased, though her smile was warm. "It's important," Nathan replied, his tone serious. They worked in silence for nearly an hour, scanning record after record, until Grace suddenly stopped. "Wait," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Look at this." She handed him a file. The names were redacted, but the dates and details matched perfectly. Twin boys. One listed as Baby A, the other as Baby B. Baby A had been adopted by a local family, while Baby B was recorded as being transferred to a foster home. Nathan stared at the document, his mind reeling. "This can't be," Grace nodded grimly. "It looks like Daniel had a twin brother." The revelation hit Nathan like a tidal wave. Eli wasn't just some random boy with a familiar face. He was Daniel's twin, a part of his family that had been lost without anyone realizing. As he drove home that night, the streets of Willow Creek seemed strangely unfamiliar. His thoughts churned with a mix of hope and grief, the weight of what he'd uncovered pressing heavily on his chest. Eli wasn't just a mystery to solve anymore. He was family, and Nathan was determined to bring him home. Nathan Carter sat at the kitchen table, the file from Willow Creek Hospital spread out in front of him like a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. The revelation that Daniel had a twin, Eli, had been both shocking and surreal. Across from him, Amanda sipped her coffee, her brow furrowed as she read over the same documents. "They were separated," Nathan said, his voice low. "Daniel and Eli were separated at birth, Amanda. And we never even knew." Amanda set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly. "How could this happen? Who makes a decision like that, to split twins apart?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted. "But I'm going to find out. And I'm going to make it right." Amanda leaned forward, her eyes searching his. "Nathan, if this is true, it changes everything. But what about Eli? Does he even want to know us? He's been alone for so long. He might not be ready for this." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't think any of us are ready. But we can't ignore this. He's family, Amanda. Daniel's brother." Amanda nodded slowly, her expression softening. "So, what do we do now?" Nathan reached for his phone. "The first step is getting proof. I need to talk to Eli again and ask him to take a DNA test." Finding Eli again wasn't easy. Nathan drove back to Preston Street and searched the usual spots: the alley behind the convenience store, the park bench near the shelter, and even the diner where they'd shared a meal. Hours passed with no sign of him. Just as Nathan was about to give up, he spotted a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost near the community center. "Eli!" Nathan called, stepping out of his car. Eli turned, his face shadowed under the hood of his jacket. He didn't move, but his posture stiffened as Nathan approached. "What do you want now?" Eli asked, his tone guarded. "I need to talk to you," Nathan said, his voice calm but firm. "It's important." Eli folded his arms, his gaze wary. "I already told you everything I know." "This isn't about what you know," Nathan said. "It's about who you are." Eli's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Nathan hesitated, then pulled the file from his jacket. "I found some records, Eli, from the hospital where you were born. They show that you had a twin brother." Eli stared at him, his expression unreadable. "So what?" "So," Nathan continued, "I think that twin was my son, Daniel. I think you and Daniel are brothers." For a moment, Eli didn't say anything. Then he laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. "You're crazy," he said, shaking his head. "You think just because some paper says so, I'm supposed to believe we're family?" "I know it's hard to believe," Nathan said. "That's why I'm asking you to take a DNA test. It's quick, and it'll give us the answers we need." Eli's jaw tightened. "No, I don't need some test to tell me who I am. I've been on my own my whole life, and I'm fine with that. You don't have to be alone anymore, Nathan said gently. We can figure this out together. But Eli stepped back, his shoulders stiff with defiance. I don't need your help. Just leave me alone. Before Nathan could respond, Eli turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Nathan returned home that night, his heart heavy. Amanda was waiting for him in the living room, her eyes filled with concern. How did it go? She asked. He didn't want to hear it. Nathan admitted. He thinks I'm crazy. And maybe I am. Amanda stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. You're not crazy, Nathan. You're a father trying to do what's right. But Eli's been through so much. He needs time. Nathan nodded, though the weight of the day's events still pressed heavily on his chest. I just want him to know he's not alone, he said quietly. That he has a family. Days passed without any word from Eli. Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd pushed too hard, too fast. But just when he was starting to lose hope, there was a knock at the door. Amanda opened it to find Eli standing on the porch, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked nervous, his gaze darting around as if he were ready to bolt at any moment. I changed my mind, Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. About the test. Let's do it. Nathan stepped forward, relief washing over him. Thank you, Eli. You won't regret this. The test itself was quick and simple. A nurse at the local clinic took cheek swabs from both Nathan and Eli, explaining that the results would take a few days. The wait felt like an eternity. When the results finally arrived, Nathan opened the envelope with trembling hands. Amanda stood beside him, her breath held as he scanned the document. 99.9% probability of a biological relationship. Nathan felt a lump rise in his throat as he handed the paper to Amanda. It's true, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Eli is Daniel's twin. Amanda covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, she whispered. Nathan, we found him. Eli sat across the room, watching them with a mix of confusion and unease. What does it say? He asked, his tone guarded. Nathan handed him the paper. It says we're family, Eli. You and Daniel are brothers. Eli's eyes scanned the page, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head, crumpling the paper in his fist. This doesn't change anything, he said, his voice rising. I don't know you, and I didn't know him. So stop acting like this is some big, happy reunion. Nathan took a step closer, his voice calm but firm. It doesn't have to change everything all at once. But it's the truth, Eli. You deserve to. Know where you come from. I don't need a family, Eli snapped. I've been fine on my own. I don't need you to fix me. No one's trying to fix you, Amanda said softly. We just want to know you, to give you a chance to know us. Eli looked away, his jaw tight. I don't know if I can do this, he muttered. That's okay, Nathan said. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. Eli stood abruptly, his fists clenched at his sides. I need some air, he said, and before either of them could stop him, he was out the door. Nathan and Amanda watched him go, their hearts heavy but hopeful. They knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The late afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains in Amanda Carter's cozy kitchen, bathing the room in warm, golden light. The scent of freshly baked cookies filled the air, a soothing aroma that Amanda hoped would ease the tension that hung between her and the teenager sitting stiffly at the table. Eli stared at the steaming plate of cookies in front of him, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. He looked like he was ready to bolt at any moment. Nathan had managed to convince him to come over for a family talk, but his body language made it clear he wasn't happy about it. Amanda set a glass of milk in front of him and sat down, her warm smile doing little to soften Eli's guarded expression. You don't have to eat them, she said gently, but they're here if you want. Eli glanced at the cookies, then at Amanda. Why do you care so much? He muttered, his voice low but sharp. You don't even know me. Amanda folded her hands on the table, her expression calm but earnest. I care because you're part of our family, Eli. You may not feel that way yet, but we do. Eli scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Family, he said bitterly. Yeah, right? Where were you when I was sleeping under bridges? When I had to dig through dumpsters just to eat? Amanda's heart ached at his words, but she didn't flinch. You're right, she said softly. We weren't there, and I can't change that. But we're here now, and we want to make things better, if you'll let us. For a moment, Eli didn't respond. Then he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What do you even want from me? Amanda took a deep breath. I want you to know about Daniel, your brother. I want you to know who he was and how much he meant to us. Because I think if you knew him, even just a little, it might help you understand how much you mean to us too. Eli frowned, his defenses wavering. Why would I want to hear about someone I never even met? Because he would have loved you, Amanda said, her voice breaking slightly. And I think you would have loved him too. She stood and left the room, returning a moment later with a photo album. She placed it on the table in front of Eli and opened it to a page filled with pictures of Daniel. In one photo, he was grinning widely as he held up a fishing rod, a tiny fish dangling from the line. In another, he was blowing out the candles on a birthday cake, his face lit up with pure joy. Eli's eyes lingered on the photos despite himself. He looks happy, he said quietly. He was, Amanda said, sitting down again. He was kind, funny, and so full of life. But he was also stubborn, just like you. If he believed in something, there was no changing his mind. Eli's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Sounds annoying. Amanda chuckled softly. He could be, but he always meant well. He had this way of making everyone around him feel special, like they mattered. And I think he would have done the same for you. Eli looked down at the table, his fingers brushing the edge of the photo album. For the first time, his hardened expression softened. That evening, Nathan joined them for dinner. The table was set with simple dishes, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, and the atmosphere was surprisingly relaxed. Eli ate cautiously at first, but as the meal went on, he began to let his guard down, joining in on the occasional conversation. You know, Nathan said, gesturing with his fork, Daniel used to do this thing where he'd mix his mashed potatoes with his green beans. Said it made them taste better. Eli raised an eyebrow. That's disgusting. Amanda laughed, shaking her head. I told him the same thing, but he wouldn't listen. He was convinced it was the best way to eat them. Eli smirked, a hint of amusement flickering across his face. Guess he really was stubborn. After dinner, Nathan pulled out an old box of Daniel's belongings and set it on the coffee table in the living room. I thought you might want to see this, he said. Eli hesitated before sitting down on the couch. He watched as Nathan carefully opened the box and began pulling out items. A worn baseball glove, a stack of comic books, a small trophy from a local soccer league. This was his favorite, Nathan said, holding up the glove. He used it every summer, even when it started falling apart. Eli took the glove, running his fingers over the cracked leather. Did he play a lot? Every chance he got, Nathan said. We used to spend hours in the backyard, tossing the ball back and forth. He wanted to be a professional player when he grew up. Eli's grip on the glove tightened. He sounds like he was pretty great. He was, Amanda said, her voice soft. And I think he would have been so proud to know you. Over the next few weeks, Eli began to open up more. He started joining the Carters for dinner regularly, and although he still kept his walls up, he allowed glimpses of vulnerability to show. One evening, as Amanda was clearing the table, Eli picked up a guitar that had been sitting in the corner of the living room. Did this belong to Daniel too? He asked, strumming the strings lightly. Amanda smiled. It did. He loved music. He wasn't the best at it, but he had so much fun playing. Eli ran his fingers along the neck of the guitar, a thoughtful expression on his face. I used to mess around with guitars at the community center, he admitted. Nothing serious, but I liked it. Why don't you give it a try? Nathan suggested. Eli hesitated, then shrugged. Okay, but don't expect much. He began to play, the notes shaky at first but growing stronger with each chord. Amanda and Nathan watched, their hearts swelling as they saw glimpses of Daniel in Eli's movements. The way he tilted his head while concentrating, the slight smile that crept onto his face when he hit a particularly good note. When he finished, Amanda clapped softly. That was beautiful, Eli. Eli set the guitar down, his cheeks slightly flushed. Thanks, he mumbled. In the days that followed, Eli began to show more of himself. He told Nathan about the years he spent in foster care, the nights he slept on park benches, and the small acts of kindness that kept him going. Nathan listened intently, his respect for Eli growing with each story. "You've been through so much," he said one evening, "but you're still here, still fighting. That takes strength." Eli shrugged, but there was a hint of pride in his eyes. The bond between them deepened as they spent more time together. Eli began to see pieces of himself in the Carters, in Nathan's determination, in Amanda's compassion, and most of all in the memories of Daniel. One afternoon, while flipping through the photo album again, Eli paused on a picture of Daniel holding up a trophy, his face beaming with pride. "You know," Eli said, his voice quiet, "I think I would have liked him." Nathan placed a hand on Eli's shoulder, his voice steady. "He would have liked you too." For the first time, Eli allowed himself to believe it. Nathan Carter sat in his patrol car, gripping the steering wheel as the weight of his newfound knowledge bore down on him. For weeks, the truth had been unspooling before him, each thread leading deeper into a tangled web of deceit. Eli wasn't just Daniel's twin. He was a victim of a system designed to profit from families like theirs. Nathan knew he couldn't let this stand. He parked outside the Willow Creek Gazette, a small but respected newspaper that had a reputation for tackling corruption. Inside, journalist Sarah Lawson was waiting for him. Nathan had contacted her after hearing about her exposé on fraudulent foster care practices, and her curiosity about his case was immediate. "Officer Carter," Sarah greeted, extending a hand. She was sharp-eyed and dressed in a practical blazer, a notepad already in hand. "You've got my attention. What are we looking at?" Nathan handed her a folder filled with hospital records, adoption documents, and the DNA test results linking Eli to Daniel. Sarah's eyes widened as she sifted through the papers, her fingers tracing the damning details. "This isn't just a tragic mistake," she said, her voice low but firm. "This was deliberate. Separating twins for profit? That's not just unethical, it's criminal." Nathan nodded. "I need your help. We need to find out who's behind this and hold them accountable. Families like mine deserve answers." Sarah's gaze was steely. "You've come to the right person. Let's get to work." The next few days were a whirlwind of research and interviews. Sarah's network of sources proved invaluable as she dug into the history of New Horizons Adoption Services, the agency responsible for Eli's placement. "Look at this," Sarah said one evening, pointing to a series of financial transactions on her laptop. New Horizons received significant funding from a private foundation, Wentworth Enterprises. Nathan frowned. "Wentworth? As in Vincent Greer, the real estate mogul?" Sarah nodded. "Exactly. His name comes up again and again in connection with adoption agencies accused of shady practices. But he's always managed to keep himself clean, on paper at least." Nathan's jaw tightened. Vincent Greer was a powerful figure in the community, known for his philanthropy and influence. If he was involved, it explained why no one had uncovered this network before. "We need more evidence," Nathan said. "Something that ties him directly to the illegal adoptions." Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. "I have a contact who used to work at New Horizons. If anyone knows how Wentworth is connected, it's her." The following day, Sarah arranged a meeting with her source, a former caseworker named Linda Martin. They met in a quiet cafe on the edge of town, where Linda sat nervously, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea. "I don't want any trouble," Linda said, glancing around the room. "Wentworth has powerful friends. If he finds out I talked to you, we'll protect your identity," Sarah assured her. "But we need the truth. Families have been torn apart because of what happened at New Horizons." Linda hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you didn't hear this from me." She explained how New Horizons had operated under the guise of a legitimate agency, while secretly funneling children into illegal adoptions. Families with twins or siblings were targeted because they were more valuable. Wentworth's foundation provided the funding, Linda said, her voice shaking. But it wasn't just about money. He had connections in the medical field, doctors who falsified birth records to make it look like one child had died. Those children were then sold to wealthy families willing to pay top dollar. Nathan felt a surge of anger, his fists clenching under the table. "And no one stopped him?" "People tried," Linda said, "but anyone who got too close was either silenced or discredited." Wentworth's reach is long, and he doesn't play fair. Armed with Linda's testimony, Nathan and Sarah delved deeper into Wentworth's operations. They uncovered a network of shell companies designed to hide the flow of money between his foundation and New Horizons. "This guy's a pro," Sarah muttered, scanning through a spreadsheet of transactions. But even pros make mistakes. One transaction stood out, a payment to a local hospital coinciding with the date of Daniel and Eli's birth. Nathan's stomach turned as he realized what it meant. "He paid the hospital to separate them," Nathan said, his voice cold. Sarah nodded grimly. "And that's just the tip of the iceberg." Their investigation eventually led them to Dr. Peter Callahan, a retired obstetrician who had worked at Willow Creek Hospital during the years in question. Nathan and Sarah tracked him down to a gated retirement community on the outskirts of the city. Dr. Callahan was reluctant to talk at first, but Nathan's persistence wore him down. "I was young," Callahan admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. "I didn't know what I was getting into at first. They told me it was for the greater good, that these children would have better lives. But when I realized what was really happening, it was too late." "Did Vincent Greer orchestrate it?" Sarah asked. Callahan nodded. "He was the one pulling the strings. I was just a pawn." With Callahan's confession and Linda's testimony, Sarah prepared an explosive exposé detailing the illegal adoption network. The story was published online and in print, sparking outrage across the community. News outlets picked up the story, and protests erupted outside Wentworth Enterprises. Families who had used New Horizons came forward with their own heartbreaking stories, adding fuel to the fire. Nathan watched the news coverage from his living room, his emotions a mix of relief and anger. Amanda sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm. "This is just the beginning," Amanda said softly. Nathan nodded. "We've got the truth out there, but now we need justice." Days later, Nathan and Sarah attended a press conference held by the district attorney, who announced a full investigation into Wentworth Enterprises and its connection to New Horizons. Vincent Greer himself was nowhere to be seen, but his legal team issued a statement denying all allegations. Nathan wasn't surprised. Someone like Wentworth wouldn't go down without a fight. That evening, Nathan sat with Eli in the backyard, the two of them watching the sun set over the horizon. "You did all this for me?" Eli asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Nathan shook his head. "I did it for you, for Daniel, and for every family that's been hurt by this. But it's not over yet. We still have a long way to go." Eli was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I'm glad you didn't give up." Nathan smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "Neither did you, kid. And that's what makes all the difference." The air in the courthouse buzzed with tension as people filed into the courtroom, their hushed whispers mixing with the distant shuffle of legal papers and the occasional click of a gavel. Nathan Carter sat at the plaintiff's table beside Sarah Lawson and their legal counsel, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Across the aisle, Vincent Greer sat stiffly with his legal team, his polished appearance a sharp contrast to the storm brewing around him. Today was the beginning of the end, or so Nathan hoped. The courtroom was packed. Families whose lives had been shattered by New Horizons filled the gallery, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and anguish. Eli sat with Amanda in the second row, his expression unreadable but his body tense. Nathan turned and gave him a small nod, silently reassuring him that they were in this fight together. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor, an experienced woman named Laura Benson, painted a vivid picture of Wentworth's crimes. Decades of fraud, manipulation, and the deliberate separation of families for financial gain. "Vincent Greer exploited the most vulnerable among us," Benson declared, her voice steady and forceful. "He tore families apart and sold children as commodities, all while hiding behind a facade of philanthropy. Today, we seek justice for those he wronged." Wentworth's defense attorney, a man with a slick demeanor named Victor Green, countered with an air of practiced confidence. "The allegations against my client are baseless," he said. "Mr. Wentworth has dedicated his life to charitable causes. These accusations are nothing more than a smear campaign orchestrated by disgruntled former employees and individuals seeking monetary gain." Nathan clenched his fists under the table, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He knew the defense would try to discredit the evidence, but hearing it spoken so dismissively still stung. The first witness called to the stand was Evelyn Harper. The elderly woman walked slowly to the witness box, her frail frame a stark contrast to the strength of her resolve. "Mrs. Green," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court about the night you rescued Eli Foster from the fire at the Foster home?" Evelyn's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. She recounted the harrowing events of that night, her determination to save Eli, and the heartbreak of learning that he had no family to claim him. "And did you later learn that Eli Foster had a twin brother?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Evelyn said firmly, her gaze fixed on the jury. "I learned that he had a brother, Daniel Carter, who was adopted by a different family. They never should have been separated." Victor Green rose for the cross-examination, his tone oozing with false sympathy. "Mrs. Green, isn't it true that you have no direct knowledge of my client's involvement in these events?" Evelyn didn't waver. "What I know is that this boy deserved better. And if Mr. Wentworth had anything to do with what happened to him, then he should answer for it." Next, Florence Baker took the stand. The former foster care worker's testimony was a bombshell. She revealed how New Horizons had destroyed records, falsified documents, and silenced anyone who questioned their practices. "They told me to stay quiet," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "They said if I spoke up, I'd lose my job, and worse. But I couldn't live with the guilt anymore. Families deserve to know the truth." Her words brought tears to the eyes of many in the gallery, and Nathan felt a swell of gratitude for her courage. The prosecution presented damning evidence. Financial records linking Wentworth's foundation to New Horizons, testimony from Dr. Peter Callahan about falsified birth certificates, and correspondence showing that Wentworth had directly approved payments to hospitals involved in the scheme. When the prosecutor called Nathan to the stand, he took a deep breath and stepped forward, his police badge glinting slightly as he adjusted his tie. "Officer Carter," Benson began, "can you tell the court about your investigation into New Horizons and Vincent Greer?" Nathan recounted everything. The discovery of Eli's connection to Daniel, the hospital records that revealed their separation, and the trail of evidence that led to Wentworth. "And how has this affected your family?" Vincent asked, her voice softening. Nathan glanced toward Amanda and Eli in the gallery, his throat tightening. "It's been a long road," he said. "We lost our son, Daniel, 7 years ago. And now we've found Eli, his twin brother. But we can't truly heal until there's justice. For Eli, for Daniel, and for all the other families who've suffered because of this." The defense attempted to undermine Nathan's testimony, but he held his ground. When he returned to his seat, Sarah leaned over and whispered, "You did great." The trial lasted for weeks, each day filled with emotional testimonies and relentless arguments. The jury deliberated for 2 days before finally returning with their verdict. In a packed courtroom, the foreman stood and read the decision. "We find the defendant, Vincent Greer, guilty on all charges." The gallery erupted in gasps and murmurs of relief. Families embraced one another, tears streaming down their faces. Nathan felt Amanda's hand squeeze his arm, and when he turned, he saw Eli watching the scene with a mixture of emotions. As the judge pronounced the sentence, 25 years in prison for Wentworth and the immediate forfeiture of his assets to compensate the victims, Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Justice had been served. That evening, the Carters gathered in their living room, the weight of the trial slowly lifting from their shoulders. Eli sat quietly, his fingers tracing the edge of a photo of Daniel that Amanda had placed on the coffee table. "Does this mean it's over?" Eli asked, his voice uncertain. Nathan sat beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's a step forward," he said, "but healing takes time. We'll get there together." Eli nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "It's just a lot to take in, knowing what happened to us, to all those other kids. It's hard to feel okay about it." Amanda joined them, her eyes filled with empathy. "It's okay to feel that way, Eli. You've been through so much. But you're not alone anymore. We're here for you, every step of the way." Eli looked at her, then at Nathan, and for the first time, his guarded expression softened into something resembling trust. "Thanks," he said quietly. As the family sat together, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a warm, golden glow. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, they felt a sense of hope, a light breaking through the shadows. The morning sun filtered through the curtains into Carter's living room, bathing the space in a soft, warm glow. Eli sat at the dining table with Nathan and Amanda, a neatly dressed clerk from the local Department of Records sitting across from him. In her hands was a brand new ID card that bore a name Eli had never used before: Noah Carter's. The clerk handed it to him with a smile. "Congratulations, Noah. You're officially part of the Carter's family." Eli stared at the card, his fingers trembling slightly as he traced the printed letters. He had agreed to take the name after much thought, understanding that it was more than just a label. It was a symbol of the family he was now part of, a family he hadn't known he wanted until recently. "Noah Carter's," he said aloud, testing the words on his tongue. "It suits you," Amanda said, her voice warm with pride. Nathan clapped a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Welcome home, son." For the first time in a long time, Eli allowed himself a smile. Not a small, fleeting smirk, but a genuine smile that lit up his face. "Thanks, Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Later that day, Amanda called Eli into the living room. On the coffee table was a large, leather-bound scrapbook with a simple inscription on the front: "For Noah." "I've been working on this for you," Amanda said, gesturing for him to sit. Eli hesitated, then sank onto the couch. Amanda opened the book, revealing the first page, a photograph of a baby with chubby cheeks and a bright smile. "That's Daniel," Amanda said softly. "He was only 6 months old in this picture." Eli studied the photo, his fingers hovering just above the glossy surface. "He looks happy," he said. "He was," Amanda said with a nod. "He brought so much joy to our lives. But now, so do you." She turned the page, revealing more photos. Daniel playing in the backyard, blowing out birthday candles, and holding a soccer trophy with a wide grin. Each image was accompanied by a small caption, written in Amanda's neat handwriting, describing the moment. As they went through the scrapbook, Amanda added something new to each memory. "Daniel loved playing soccer, just like you love the guitar," she said, pointing to one photo. "He used to hum while he worked on puzzles, just like you do when you're concentrating on something." Eli listened intently, a lump forming in his throat as he realized how many small traits he shared with Daniel. Despite their different paths, there was an unspoken bond that tied them together. When they reached the last page, Amanda handed Eli a pen. "This book isn't finished," she said. "I left the last few pages blank for your story. I thought you could add to it, so it's not just about Daniel, but about both of you." Eli swallowed hard, his chest tightening with emotion. He took the pen and nodded. "I'd like that," he said quietly. The week after officially becoming Noah Carter's, Eli found himself at the Willow Creek Community Center, standing backstage at the annual talent show. The room was buzzing with excitement as performers prepared for their turns under the bright lights. Eli clutched Daniel's old guitar, his fingers absently plucking at the strings as he tried to calm his nerves. He had spent weeks writing a song, something personal, something that captured the whirlwind journey he'd been on. Amanda and Nathan sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Amanda had brought the scrapbook, holding it in her lap like a good luck charm, while Nathan kept his camera ready to record Eli's performance. When Eli's name was called, he took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were brighter than he expected, casting the audience in a shadow. But in the first row, he could see his parents' smiling faces, their encouragement steadying him. "Hi," Eli said into the microphone, his voice echoing slightly. "I'm Noah Carter's, and this song is about my journey. It's for my brother, Daniel, and for everyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong." The audience fell silent as Eli began to play. The first chords were soft and tentative, but as he found his rhythm, the melody grew stronger, filling the room with warmth and emotion. The lyrics told his story: the loneliness of growing up without a family, the discovery of a brother he never knew, and the unexpected love that had brought him home. Each word was raw and heartfelt, carrying the weight of his experiences. I've walked through shadows, lost and alone, but I've found my way. I've found my home. Through the echoes of a brother's love, I rise. I soar. I'm enough. As Eli's voice soared through the final chorus, the room seemed to hold its breath. When the last note faded, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the audience erupted into applause. Amanda wiped tears from her eyes, her heart swelling with pride. Nathan stood and cheered, his camera still recording as he clapped. Eli bowed slightly, a shy smile on his face. He stepped off the stage and was immediately enveloped in a hug from Amanda. "That was beautiful, Noah," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan ruffled Eli's hair, grinning. "You've got some talent, kid." As the night went on, other performers took the stage, but the buzz about Eli's song lingered. People approached him to offer congratulations, their words full of admiration for his honesty and courage. "You've got a gift," said one of the judges, a local music teacher. "Keep writing, and don't stop sharing your story." When the talent show ended, the Carter's family walked out into the cool night air, their hearts light. Eli carried Daniel's guitar case, the weight of it now feeling like a comforting reminder of the brother who had inspired him. "I'm proud of you, Noah," Nathan said as they reached the car. "Not just for night, but for everything. You've come so far." Eli nodded, his smile small but genuine. "Thanks, Dad." Amanda wrapped an arm around Eli's shoulders. "This is just the beginning," she said. And for the first time, Eli believed her. As they drove home, the scrapbook sat on Eli's lap, its blank pages waiting to be filled with new memories. The night sky stretched endlessly above them, full of possibilities. The autumn wind carried the scent of freshly fallen leaves as the Carter's family walked up the gentle slope of Maple Hill Cemetery. Eli trailed slightly behind Nathan and Amanda, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, the silver necklace around his neck catching the sunlight with each step. At the crest of the hill, they reached Daniel's grave. The headstone was simple but elegant, etched with his name, his birth and death dates, and the words "beloved son" and "brother." Amanda knelt first, brushing away a few stray leaves that had settled against the stone. Nathan placed a small bouquet of white lilies on the grave, the flowers swaying slightly in the breeze. He rested a hand on Amanda's shoulder, his face somber but calm. Eli stood back for a moment, watching them. His heart felt heavy, but it wasn't the same weight of loneliness he'd carried for years. This was something different, grief, yes, but also connection. He hadn't known Daniel, but in so many ways, he felt like he did. Amanda looked over her shoulder and smiled softly. "Come here, Noah," she said, her voice gentle. Eli took a deep breath and stepped forward. He knelt beside the grave, his fingers brushing the cool surface of the headstone. The name Daniel Carter seemed to glow in the soft afternoon light, a reminder of the brother he'd never meet but would carry with him forever. Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He hesitated for a moment, then smoothed it out and placed it at the base of the headstone. "What's that?" Amanda asked, her voice curious but warm. "It's a letter," Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For Daniel. I've been writing it for a while, but I thought this was the right time to leave it here." Nathan crouched beside him, his expression thoughtful. "What does it say?" Eli hesitated, then glanced at Nathan and Amanda. "I can read it if you want." Amanda nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We'd love to hear it." Eli unfolded the paper and began to read, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Dear Daniel, I wish I'd gotten to know you. Everyone tells me how kind you were, how much you loved life, and made people around you feel special. And even though we never met, I feel like I know you, through Mom and Dad, through the stories they tell, and even through this necklace. You were everything I never thought I could be, strong, loved, and a part of something bigger than yourself. But because of you, I'm starting to believe that maybe I can be those things too. I promise to live a life that honors you. I'll be kind like you were. I'll work hard, and I'll try to make a difference, just like I think you would have. I'll make sure Mom and Dad are taken care of, and I'll be the brother you would have been proud of. Thank you for being my guide, even from afar. I'll carry your memory with me always. Your brother, Noah. When he finished, the silence that followed was filled with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. Amanda wiped her cheeks, unable to hold back her tears any longer. Nathan cleared his throat, his hand resting on Eli's shoulder. That was beautiful, son, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. Eli folded the letter carefully and placed it back at the base of the headstone. I hope he knows, he said quietly. Amanda leaned in and kissed Eli's temple. He does. I'm sure of it. As they stood together at the grave, the weight of unspoken words hung in the air. Eli turned to face Nathan and Amanda, his eyes full of an emotion he hadn't fully understood until now. I've been thinking, he said, his voice hesitant but steady. You've both done so much for me, more than I ever thought anyone would. And I've never really said it, but I think of you as my family now. My real family. Amanda's breath caught, her hand covering her mouth. Nathan stood still, his eyes locked on Eli. I mean, if it's okay, Eli continued, looking down at his feet. If I called you Mom and Dad. Amanda stepped forward, wrapping Eli in a tight embrace. Her tears spilled freely now, but her smile was radiant. Of course it's okay, Noah. You've always been our son in our hearts. Nathan joined the embrace, his strong arms encircling them both. We're proud to be your parents, son, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. And we always will be. For a long moment, they stood there, holding each other. The bond between them solidified in a way that words could never fully capture. In the weeks that followed, the Carter's family began to find a new rhythm. Life wasn't perfect. Grief and healing rarely were. But there was a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. Eli started helping Nathan with small projects around the house, learning how to fix things and taking pride in his newfound skills. Amanda taught him how to cook, sharing recipes that had been passed down through her family for generations. One evening, after dinner, Amanda brought out the scrapbook she had made for Eli. This time, the blank pages weren't empty. Together, they added new memories. Photos from the talent show, a picture of Eli and Nathan working on the roof, and a snapshot of Amanda teaching Eli how to make her famous apple pie. This book is about both of you now, Amanda said, smiling as she added a caption under one of the photos. Daniel and Noah, 2 brothers, 1 family. Eli ran his fingers over the pages, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged. On a quiet Saturday morning, Eli took Daniel's guitar and sat on the porch, strumming softly as the sunlight warmed his skin. Nathan came out with 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to Eli before sitting beside him. Thinking about the future? Nathan asked, sipping his coffee. Eli nodded. Yeah, I've been thinking about music, maybe trying to do something with it. Daniel loved it, and I think I do too. Nathan smiled. I think that's a great idea. Whatever you choose, we'll be here to support you. Eli looked at him, his expression serious. Thanks, Dad, for everything. Nathan placed a hand on Eli's shoulder, his smile widening. You're welcome, son. Always. As the morning unfolded, the Carter's family went about their day, their hearts a little lighter, their bonds a little stronger. They weren't just healing, they were growing together. And as Eli strummed his guitar, the melody weaving through the crisp autumn air, it felt like Daniel was there with them, his presence a quiet but steadfast part of their family's journey. The Carter's backyard was alive with laughter, music, and the warm chatter of friends and neighbors. Strings of twinkling lights hung between the oak trees, casting a soft glow over the gathering. The autumn air was crisp but inviting, and the scent of barbecue wafted through the space. Amanda stood by the long picnic table, arranging plates of food as Nathan tended to the grill. Eli was on the porch steps, tuning Daniel's guitar. He had been preparing for this moment for weeks, and though his fingers trembled slightly, he felt ready. This wasn't just a gathering, it was a celebration. The Carter's family had invited everyone who had played a role in their journey. Sarah Lawson, whose investigative journalism had exposed the truth about New Horizons. Florence Baker, whose courageous testimony had helped convict Vincent Greer. And Evelyn Harper, who had saved Eli all those years ago. As the crowd settled, Nathan stepped to the center of the yard, holding up his glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" he called out, his voice carrying over the hum of conversation. The chatter quieted, and all eyes turned to him. "Thank you all for being here," Nathan began. "This day means more to us than I can put into words. Over the past year, our family has been on a journey of loss, discovery, and healing. And none of it would have been possible without the support of everyone here." He paused, glancing at Amanda, who smiled back at him with tears in her eyes. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating our family. We're celebrating the power of truth, of love, and of second chances." The crowd erupted into applause, and Nathan raised his glass. "To family in all its forms. To family," the guests echoed, lifting their own glasses. As the applause died down, Nathan gestured toward Eli. "And now my son Noah has something he'd like to share." Eli stood, cradling Daniel's guitar. The crowd parted as he made his way to the small, makeshift stage. The silver necklace around his neck glinted under the lights, a quiet but powerful symbol of the brother who had brought them all together. Eli adjusted the microphone, his gaze sweeping over the audience. "Hi, everyone," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "First, I want to say thank you for helping me find a place where I belong, for helping us uncover the truth, and for showing me what it means to be part of a family." He took a deep breath, his fingers brushing the strings of the guitar. "This song is for Daniel, and for anyone who's ever felt lost but found their way back to love." The first notes rang out, soft and haunting. The melody carried a sense of longing, but also hope, like a journey through darkness into light. Eli's voice was clear and strong as he sang. "I walk through shadows, searching for home, carried by echoes of a love I'd never known. A brother's whisper, a guiding star, led me to a family where I could heal my scars." The crowd was mesmerized. Tears shimmered in Amanda's eyes, and Nathan's chest swelled with pride. Even Sarah, always composed, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The chorus soared, capturing the essence of Eli's transformation. "Through loss, through pain, I found my place. In the arms of love, I saw your face. Daniel, you're the light that shines on. Your legacy lives, though you are gone." As the final notes faded, a profound silence settled over the backyard, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves. Then, the crowd erupted into applause, standing to their feet. Eli looked out at the sea of faces, his heart full. For the first time, he felt entirely at peace, not just with his past, but with the person he had become. After the song, the family gathered near Daniel's favorite tree, where they had placed a small plaque in his honor. It read, "Daniel Carter's forever in our hearts." Amanda rested her hand on the plaque, her voice trembling with emotion. Daniel's life may have been short, but his impact was immeasurable. He taught us to love deeply, to never give up, and to believe in the power of connection. Nathan added, "And through Noah, his spirit continues. This family is stronger because of both of our sons, one who is with us and one who watches over us." Evelyn stepped forward, her warm smile radiating pride. "Daniel brought Noah to you," she said. "And in doing so, he reminded us all that even in loss, there is hope." Margaret nodded, her own voice filled with emotion. The truth has a way of bringing people together. And seeing this family united, it's proof that the fight for justice was worth it. As the night wound down, Eli found himself sitting on the porch steps, staring up at the stars. The guests had begun to leave, their laughter and warm goodbyes lingering in the air. Amanda came out and sat beside him, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. "You were amazing tonight," she said, nudging him gently. Eli smiled. "Thanks, Mom." The word still felt new on his tongue, but it came naturally now, carrying with it a warmth he never thought he'd feel. Amanda studied him for a moment, her eyes soft. "You know, Daniel would be so proud of you." Eli looked down at the necklace, his fingers brushing the silver pendant. "I hope so," he said. I think about him a lot, about how different our lives were, but also how connected we are. Amanda placed a hand on his. You're honoring him every day, Noah. By being yourself, by choosing kindness, by finding joy. That's all he would have wanted. Nathan joined them a moment later, carrying 3 mugs of hot cocoa. He handed one to Eli and one to Amanda before sitting on Eli's other side. So, Nathan said, his tone light, what's next for Noah Carter's? Eli grinned. I don't know yet. Music, maybe. Helping other kids who've been through what I've been through. Something that matters. Nathan nodded, his smile approving. Whatever you choose, we'll be here to support you. As they sat together, sipping cocoa under the stars, Eli felt something he hadn't felt in years, certainty. Certainty that he was loved, that he belonged, and that his future was bright. The necklace around his neck glinted in the moonlight, a constant reminder of the brother who had guided him home. And as the night deepened, Eli knew that while Daniel's life had ended too soon, his legacy would live on, through the family that loved him and the brother who carried his light into the future. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heartfelt journey. Your time and attention mean the world to us. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss more inspiring tales like this one. Together, let's continue sharing stories that touch hearts and bring hope. See you in the next chapter.